This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, one place that the United States fell very far behind under Joe Biden and before him Barack Obama was in rare earth minerals. Now, rare earth minerals are, of course, mined around the world. There's two kinds. There's soft rare earth minerals. Those are required to make things like cell phones or toasters or other personal electronic devices. And then there are hard rare earth minerals. We need them to make airplanes, fighter jets, tanks, and so on. The Communist Chinese had very, very aggressively gotten control of most, about 80% of the world's rare earth minerals in South America, Central America, Asia, even parts of Eastern Europe. Donald Trump has recognized this great danger, and he's put together a rare earth minerals working group within his administration. Just this past week, on the 4th, the United States convened a ministerial-level summit of critical mineral producing companies, including a number of prominent African countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, and Guinea among them. That meeting actually reflects Washington's growing determination to secure access to resources that have really become indispensable to any modern economy, necessary for advanced manufacturing and high technology industries. This diplomatic move by Trump illustrates, I think, a broader calibration of both U.S. policy of engagement with Africa, increasingly shaped by resource security, industrial policy, and geostrategic competition, particularly, of course, with China. Critical minerals, however, are at the core of President Trump's U.S. strategic planning. Following recent diplomatic initiatives in the Middle East, Washington now seems to be moving more decisively on the issue of critical rare earth minerals, a dominion where global power balances are very rapidly, thank God, shifting. The Trump administration has made it clear that restoring U.S. centrality to strategic supply chains is a priority, not just for economic competitiveness, but also for the national security and technological sovereignty. Critical minerals, things like cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements like bauxite and graphite, minerals like potash, these are all essential for semiconductors and advanced electronics, electric vehicles, battery storage, renewable energy infrastructure. And then there's the hard rare earth minerals needed for aerospace and defense systems. Africa, interestingly, is home to some of the world's largest reserves of these resources, occupies a pivotal position in this strategic equation. So Washington's message really is security, technology, and energy resilience. The U.S. Department of State under Marco Rubio announced this meeting on the 4th via its official communication channels, indicating that Secretary Rubio would host partners from around the world for discussions focused on critical rare earth minerals. According to a statement put out, strengthening critical mineral supply chains with international partners is now essential for U.S. economic and national security, for technological leadership, and a resilient energy future. This framing underscores the extent now to which mineral policy has become intertwined with defense planning, industrial competitiveness, and energy transition strategies. The inclusion of these African producers confirms that Washington views the continent not merely as a source of raw materials, but now as a strategic arena in the restructuring of all of these global supply networks. Africa is playing a central role and has strategic leverage. The participants, I read there's a list of 14, but specifically the Dominican Republic of Congo, where President Trump recently ended a war, a long, bloody war with Rwanda, Guinea and Kenya among them, particularly significant. The DRC remains, that's the Congo, remains the world's leading producer of cobalt. Guinea holds vast bauxite reserves critical for aluminum production. And Kenya is positioning itself within regional value chains linked to energy transition minerals. So this is a big move for the Trump administration. It also shows why it's nice to have a president who sees the big picture and a president who looks ahead. It's always baffled me which president thought it was a good idea to have all of our most important pharmaceutical drugs, things like amoxicillin, for example, made in China. That seems to me like bad public policy. President Trump has moved very aggressively to build the national stockpiles of some of these really crucial pharmaceutical drugs. Once again, it's nice to have a president, who thinks about the big picture and looks ahead. A president who puts America first, not profit first. In the meantime, Ryan Routh, he was the mentally deranged leftist convicted of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump at his Florida golf club in West Palm Beach during the 2024 campaign. He's been sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 84 months. U.S. District Court Eileen Cannon, of the judge of the U.S. District Court, handed down the sentence after prosecutors pushed for life behind bars, rejecting the defense's request for a far lighter 27-year sentence. This verdict sends a strong message that political violence will not be tolerated in the United States. Routh was found guilty of attempted assassination of a presidential candidate, multiple firearms violations, and assaulting a federal officer. Jurors deliberated for just 2.5 hours before reaching their decision, a reflection of the overwhelming evidence of Routh's guilt that was presented at trial. At the very end, I watched this. It was very disturbing. When the verdict was read, Routh attempted to stab himself with a pen, unsuccessfully. There's still a lot of questions here that remain, which is Routh, who they tell us was indigent, who allegedly lived in Hawaii, was behind in his rent, was behind in his alimony payments. Yet we saw video of him in a number of European capitals where he was out recruiting mercenaries to fight the Russians in Ukraine. So who was paying for Mr. Routh's travel in this period in which we're told he's indigent? He had a very elaborate website for recruiting mercenaries to fight in Ukraine. Who paid for the construction of that website? These are strange questions. I actually met an evangelical pastor who ran into Routh on Maidan Square in Ukraine when he was there with a prayer group and got into an argument with him. So he smells like a CIA operative to me. I can't prove that, of course, but there's no explanation of how he got to the United States. He allegedly flew to North Carolina. He drove from North Carolina to Florida. How did he obtain a weapon? When arrested, he had a gun where the serial number had been filed off of the barrel. How did he obtain that? These are all questions we still don't know. I still have questions, of course, about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. But in this case, authorities say that Routh hid in the shrubbery near Trump International Golf Club in Florida back in September 15th, of 2024, aiming a rifle towards the course while Trump played nearby. Routh later claimed incredulously that he was only guilty of caring too much, arguing that possessing a weapon did not improve his intent to kill. He waited actually in the shrubbery for hours for Donald Trump to play through. These arguments didn't carry much weight with the jury, evidently. Even more chilling were letters that Routh wrote to the judge questioning why he wasn't eligible for the death penalty and suggested that he be traded to hostile regimes like China, Iran, or North Korea. Even though the killer was deranged, or he was perhaps acting deranged, it was clear that Routh knew exactly what he was attempting to do. There are many thousand of these leftist sleeper cells waiting to be activated, unfortunately, throughout our country after being subjected to 2 years of both dehumanizing propaganda about President Trump and his supporters, and of course the open borders policy of Joe Biden, which left 30,000 people into the country, at least 30,000, according to people I respect. We know that 217 of them are identified as terrorists. I venture that the number of known terrorists is far higher, or perhaps I should say the number of unknown terrorists. Media propagandists ought to be considered accomplices in Ralph's plot to assassinate the president, because they're the ones who sought to destroy Trump, calling him a dictator, or comparing him to Hitler. This is one of Stone's most important rules. If you're in a political debate and your opponent invokes the name of Adolf Hitler, that almost always means they're losing the debate. Those who are the authoritarians, those who wanted to keep Trump off the ballot, those who wanted to censor anyone in the country who questioned the 2020 election, or who questioned the safety and the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccination, or questioned whether Hunter Biden's laptop was authentic or whether it was Russian disinformation. The people who want to censor you, they are the authoritarians. The people who don't want your candidate to appear on the ballot, they are the ones who are the authoritarians. This is a great technique of the left. There's a book called Alinsky's Rules. It was written by a famous communist agitator named Saul Alinsky. Alinsky said that you should always blame your opponents, or in this case, your enemies, with doing exactly what you yourself are doing. There's no greater example of this than when we try to examine whether those who are responsible for the Russian collusion hoax, 2 phony impeachments, the theft of the 2020 election, which I'm convinced the proof of which we're going to see publicly quite soon. The evidence of it is overwhelming. Then through the January 6th Fedsurrection, of which essentially Nancy Pelosi has confessed that the whole thing is a setup on video. You can see it for yourself. And then, of course, the extra-constitutional Arctic frost investigation, in which Jack Smith tried to make questioning the outcome of an election a federal crime, tried to make the formation of alternative elector slates in the states where there are legal disputes about the outcome of the presidential election a crime. It isn't. And spied on President Trump, Republican members of the Senate and the House, and a number of his prominent supporters. Having seen their target list, I can tell you that I'm among those that was on it. So the real question here is, will these people be brought to justice? Seems to be a lot of tumult at the U.S. Department of Justice, but the question is really simple. Because I believe this is a continuing seditious conspiracy that began in 2016 in the Oval Office of Barack Obama, but goes all the way to the raid in Mar-a-Lago, there is no statute of limitations. So there is no rush, other than the rush because justice delayed is justice denied. I'm Roger Stone, and I'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
It is a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone.
If you're thinking about changing schools, why wait? At Manhattan University, love those guys. You don't have to start over. With transfer-friendly pathways, your credits count, and you keep moving forward. From day one, you're part of Jasper Nation, preparing for the real world. And with New York City just a train away, opportunity is everywhere. Ready to move forward without missing a step? Visit manhattan.edu/transfer and enroll today. Manhattan University. Don't start over, move forward.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And you're back in the Stone Zone. I have to admit, I am among those who urged President Donald Trump to do what he has now done, planning to install a statue of legendary explorer Christopher Columbus on the White House grounds. This is a powerful symbol of restoring national pride after years of left-wing attempts to destroy it. As one of the board members of the Italian American Civil Rights League, we have fought efforts to destroy the legacy of Christopher Columbus and our Italian American heritage across the country. According to sources familiar with the plan, the new statue of Columbus will be placed on the south side of the White House near the ellipse. The sculpture is essentially a reconstruction of a monument originally unveiled by one of my heroes, President Ronald Reagan, who I worked for in 3 presidential campaigns, that was torn down and dumped into Baltimore Harbor by rioters during the violent Black Lives Matter unrest of 2020. When leftist mobs attack symbols of America's pioneering past in their vain attempt to upright white supremacy, they insult us all. The damaged pieces of the statue were later recovered by Italian-American community leaders, businessmen, and local officials. Now, with the help of sculptors, charitable donations, and a federal grant, the statue has been painstakingly rebuilt and is expected to be transferred from a Maryland warehouse to the Trump White House in the coming weeks. While the White House has not formally confirmed the timeline, spokesman Davis Ingle made the admission stance clear. In this White House, Christopher Columbus is a hero, and he will continue to be honored as such by the President of the United States. Trump has long defended Columbus against Marxist historical revisionism, putting an end to the abomination that it was Indigenous Peoples Day. No, it's October 10th. It's Columbus Day. Nobody's arguing that Columbus was a saint, by the way, but we all owe him an immense debt of gratitude for his role in bringing civilization to a savage continent. The Italian American Civil Rights League was very upfront in our efforts to persuade the president to revive the statue. If you're interested, you can go to IARCL.org. IACRL.org. That's the Italian American Civil Rights League. It is a nonprofit organization. Everyone involved, including me, is a volunteer. We have no overhead, no fancy offices, no high-paid executives, but we are fighting to preserve our proud Italian American heritage. There is an effort to try to erase the contributions of people like Caruso, Frank Sinatra, Joe DiMaggio, and so many other greats. We will not allow it. We will stand up for our cultural history and our proud role in helping make America great. So check it out at the Italian American Civil Rights League.org. It's inexpensive, and as I say, it is a nonprofit. We have no overhead. Everyone involved is a volunteer. Very soon, we're going to be launching our South Florida chapter. I believe that's on March 11th. You're going to want to check it out. So once again, IACRL.org, the Italian American Civil Rights League. We were very active in supporting the president's efforts to bring this statue of Columbus back to the White House grounds. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back with more politics.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
You are jumping back into the Stone Zone, and I'm your host, Roger Stone. Well, all eyes continue to be on Iran, where mass protests continue. There's a lot of disparity between the reports of the regime, who claim that only about 12,000 people have been killed, when my own sources in the resistance tell me that number of brutal murders by the regime of protesters is closer to 36,000. Trump administration is drawing a firm line with Iran, refusing to cave to last-minute demands that could weaken upcoming nuclear negotiations and embolden the world's leading sponsor of Islamic terrorism. The regime is teetering because the quality of life has collapsed in Iran. But this is an extraordinarily brutal regime. This is a regime where mass public executions of opponents of the regime are a regularly scheduled thing. So to have the courage, as thousands, tens of thousands of Iranians do, to publicly demonstrate against the government takes an enormous amount of courage. According to U.S. officials, Iran attempted to change the location and the format of scheduled talks, but the White House made it clear it will not accept conditions that undermine serious diplomacy. While the administration has agreed to shift the venue from Istanbul to Oman, officials insist the focus must remain on achieving a strong, enforceable agreement, not one dictated by the Iranian regime. There is no way that Iran can be allowed to have nuclear weapons. They argue that they want to develop nuclear energy for the purposes of producing electricity. But there has to be on-site inspections that prove that's true. A senior U.S. official reportedly said, "We'd like to reach a deal quickly or people will look at other options." And at the heart of this dispute is the scope. You see, the Trump administration wants negotiations to address not only Iran's nuclear ambitions, but also its ballistic missile program and support for terrorist proxy groups across the Middle East. Iran, meanwhile, is attempting to limit these discussions strictly to nuclear issues, a position that critics argue could allow the Iranians to continue threatening Israel and destabilizing the region. President Trump reinforced the stakes about a week ago, noting that powerful U.S. naval assets are already moving into position. President Trump said, "If we can work something out, that would be great, but if we can't, well, probably bad things could happen." With the arrest of Nicolas Maduro and the previous surgical strikes on the Iranian nuclear weapons development programs, I think people now realize that Donald Trump is a man who does what he says and says what he will do. They would not be wise to test President Trump. I've known him for 50 years. President Trump is no doubt a man of peace. He's proven that, who would rather make a deal than start a war. But when tested, President Trump is not afraid to use military force to achieve key strategic objectives. What I like about it is that he does it in a limited and controlled way. You see, he's not a neocon. No boots on the ground, no long-term financial commitments, no American casualties. You saw this in his previous strikes in Iran, where we got in and we got out. We achieved our goal, not a single casualty from that military operation. So all eyes on Iran. This past weekend, I had Senator Bob Torricelli, former senator from New Jersey, former member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and widely recognized as an expert on Middle Eastern issues. He believes that the regime will fall on its own. They cannot sustain it. He doesn't rule out the possibility, I think this is true, that Trump could strike, for example, the Iranian Republican Guard headquarters and other strategic sites in a very limited way to try to move the collapse of the regime along. Now, the other thing I learned is that there seem to be a lot of Iranians, or a lot of people, I should say, who believe that the Iran should go from the current theocracy back to a monarchy. In other words, they favor the restoration of the Shah and the Shah's family, the House of Pahlavi. They argue that the Shah's son should be the new head of state. I don't think there is huge popular support in Iran either for the mullahs, who currently run the brutal regime, nor for the Shah and his compatriots. The Shah was an ally of the United States, a trusted ally of the United States. Therefore, I agree with former President Nixon, who in 1978 criticized Jimmy Carter bitterly for turning on the Shah, which is what allowed the mullahs to take control, and immediately humiliate the United States by grabbing 154 American hostages. On the other hand, life under the Shah, while it was more cosmopolitan and it was a more educated and civil society, he was still brutal in the question of political repression. There was nothing in the country that resembled a democracy. Now, when this show is over, I will get thousands of text messages and emails from people who tell me that I'm wrong or that that I don't understand the issues. I think most of those are bots, to be honest with you. I've seen the polling. There is no widespread support for a return to a monarchy. If anything, Iran needs to move to democratic elections, and it needs to do so as soon as feasible after the collapse of the current regime. Meanwhile, the U.S. House of Representatives narrowly passed a $1.2 trillion funding bill today, officially ending a 4-day partial government shutdown and sending the legislation to President Trump, who very quickly signed it into law. The measure cleared the House in a 217 to 214 vote amid deep partisan divisions, funding most federal agencies through the end of the fiscal year while granting only a short-term extension for the Department of Homeland Security. See, Democrats are trying to keep the budget hostage and trying to end the deportation of dangerous illegal criminals through this legislative maneuver. At the center of the standoff, as I say, immigration enforcement. Democrats resist full Department of Homeland Security funding following 2 fatal shootings of violent far-left extremists in the streets of Minneapolis. The Republican leadership warned against attaching policy conditions that could weaken agent safety and operational effectiveness. In the end, lawmakers choose to keep the government open rather than risking prolonged disruption. We saw that before. But the temporary Department of Homeland Security extension is set to only last about 2 weeks. Virtually guarantees another high-stakes battle for funding just days from now. When it comes to border security, Democrats prove continuously they're willing to play Russian roulette with our nation's homeland security. This shutdown may be over, but the larger fight, well, that's far from settled. And it will continue to be a problem until the midterms. The Democrats have dug in their heels as the party aligned against law enforcement, border patrol, and the rule of law. Of course, the narrative you hear out of Minneapolis that people of color or U.S. citizens are just arbitrarily being snatched by ICE and being arrested to be detained is a false narrative. More than 70% of those arrested by ICE so far for the purposes of deportation are criminal aliens. They either have a criminal record in their country of origin, or they have a criminal record here, or they're awaiting trial here in the United States. If the American people reject the Democrats at the ballot box next November, that will be an effective public endorsement of President Trump's robust enforcement measures. The future of America really is on the line in the upcoming elections. We better put as many America First champions on the ballot as humanly possible to ensure that we have common sense continues to dominate our government. But in the meantime, some in my party have already given up. Those people don't understand that in American politics today, in this age of mass communications, particularly with the internet, that a week is a lifetime. The electorate remains extraordinarily volatile. So the 2026 elections are neither lost nor won. It is far too early to say what will happen. We haven't even played out the question of redistricting, where states like Florida and Texas are scheduled to get additional House seats based on the census. The Democrats have played this game out. In other words, they've already maxed out on their gerrymandering in large states like Illinois and California. There is no place else really for them to get seats. Meanwhile, to my surprise, the Democrat Party in New York seems to be unifying as far-left socialist jihadi New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani surprised me by formally endorsing the most unpopular governor, perhaps in the entire United States, New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Hochul backed Mamdani during his mayoral run months ago, but during that election, the mayor would not publicly commit to supporting Hochul's reelection. He waited until now to return that favor. Now, if you understand how New York City and state government is structured, Mamdani needs a lot of things from Hochul, including, and most particularly, money. Speaking to the left-wing publication The Nation, which is an opinion journal, Mamdani framed the endorsement as a matter of trust and collaboration, arguing that leaders must, quote, deliver for the people we serve. The partnership comes as Hochul, who once billed herself as a relative moderate, has increasingly adopted policy positions more aligned with Mamdani's leftist platform. Among them is the expansion of free childcare in New York City, a costly proposal likely to fall on the backs of already overburdened taxpayers. In fact, the highest paying taxpayers in the country, New York State. Mamdani praised the Democrat Party as a big tent committed to structural change, which of course is code for higher spending, heavier regulation, and expanded government control over our everyday lives. Mamdani's never really been shy about his Marxist dog whistle. He claims during interviews that New Yorkers deserve leaders who believe in transformation, ultimately declaring that Hochul has earned his endorsement. I've been in American politics for 50 years. I've been active in a number of New York State gubernatorial campaigns. I have never seen a disapproval rating for any New York governor, Republican or Democrat, as high as that for Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul is only governor because of Andrew Cuomo. People forget that. Andrew Cuomo selected Kathy Hochul, who was previously, I believe, an Erie County clerk and then a member of Congress, to be lieutenant governor, never dreaming that the left of his own party would move to remove Andrew Cuomo because of vague Me Too claims against him, and then someone who is as inept as Hochul would end up as governor. Mamdani's pushed for higher taxes on millionaires during his campaign, a policy Hochul then publicly opposed. He initially withheld his endorsement last fall, fueling speculation that the two would move further apart. But now that divide appears to be shrinking as the governor and the mayor coordinate on major policy initiatives. This is how the far left co-opts the weak moderates in the Democrat Party. Politicians like Hochul or like Chuck Schumer will do anything to get reelected, even if it means serving as a Trojan horse for socialist extremists to get their hooks into what was formerly our free republic. The public should reject Mamdaniism. If New York's mayoral election last year is a bellwether for things to come, well then, New York City is in deep, deep trouble. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, listen to us online or don't touch that dial if you're on the radio, because we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get him a zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And you're jumping back into the Stone Zone. Sometimes Democrats are so transparent. Now Democrats are calling to ban ICE from polling places. Why would they want to do that? Congressional Democrats are once again taking aim at federal immigration enforcement, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries unveiling a sweeping list of demands designed to rein in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, just days before a critical Department of Homeland Security funding deadline. Schumer accused federal agents of terrorizing communities and causing chaos in American cities. As such, Schumer is putting forward so-called reforms which would handcuff the very officers tasked with enforcing U.S. immigration law. Among the most ridiculous provisions, but the one that is so transparent, is to prohibit enforcement operations near so-called sensitive locations, including schools, churches, but most notably, polling places. Now, why would the Democrats not want ICE agents anywhere near a polling place? Could it be because they intend to vote illegal immigrants who don't actually have the legal right to vote? There is no question. I saw a recent analysis in California. Tens of thousands of illegals voted in the 2024 election. That inclusion, of course, of polling places sparked immediate backlash from Republicans who questioned why illegals would be anywhere near voting places to begin with. Senator Katie Britt responded to Schumer's insulting proposal, saying Democrats were effectively admitting they believe illegal immigrants need to be protected at polling places, while calling for full funding of the Department of Homeland Security and passage of the SAVE Act. Now, the SAVE Act is crucial. All it does is require proof of citizenship for voting. Why would anyone be opposed to that? Only U.S. citizens should vote. The Democrat proposal also calls for banning agents from entering private property without a judicial warrant, restricting arrests, mandating body cameras, limiting the use of masks, and imposing new identification requirements. Additional measures would allow for states to sue the Department of Homeland Security, require local approval for large-scale operations, and regulate officers' uniforms to eliminate what Democrats labeled paramilitary policing. In other words, they want to cripple the effort to enforce our current immigration laws. This is all being done by design, and it's a de facto ban on ICE. Republicans need to never acquiesce to the Democrats, who will never argue in good faith or operate in league with Antifa and the far left to continue to wage war on our nation. Once again, I stress to you that more than 70% of those who have been arrested, have been detained for deportation, have criminal records either in their country of origin or here in the United States. But you wouldn't think that by watching CNN or MSNBC. In the end, because they've exposed these two signal chats and very, I would say, high-tech paramilitary operations to interfere with ICE, one of them involving the lieutenant governor of Minnesota herself, to me, that is active insurrection. If you are on a chat group which targets ICE agents, identifies them through their license plates, and sends groups of thugs to the location where they are in the process of conducting a perfectly legal arrest, that is in itself insurrection by design. And therefore, my question is, how long before the FBI arrests the lieutenant governor of Minnesota and arrests the chief political operator and manager of Tim Walz's campaigns, who appear to be the individuals running these two illegal chat operations via Signal? This is a full-fledged paramilitary, well-oiled, well-financed, well-organized illegal insurrection. But at the end of the day, President Donald Trump is the man with the nuclear option, because he can always, if necessary, he can execute the Insurrection Act of 1807. Now, instead of dealing with ICE agents or dealing with Border Patrol agents, the people on the ground in Minnesota will be dealing with the same U.S. military that very effectively removed Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. Think how that will go. Thanks for joining us today on the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.